I still remember that Friday evening like it happened yesterday. It was early December, the kind of day when the sky turns grey by 4 p.m. and the streets buzz with early Christmas shoppers. I had driven out to visit Westbridge Mall, one of those large, outdated shopping centres on the edge of town, the kind that hadn't aged well, paint peeling off concrete columns, flickering fluorescent signs, and an almost ghostly silence in the upper floors gave the whole place a strange, unsettling charm. My wife had gone in before me to find a winter coat while I parked the car, promising to meet near the food court in half an hour. But when I got there, she wasn't. Her phone rang twice, then went straight to voicemail. I tried not to panic. Maybe she had gotten distracted. Maybe she was in a dressing room. Or maybe there was just no signal. This mall had always had dead zones. I waited another 15 minutes, then walked the whole first floor. Nothing. No sign of her. And no one around who looked helpful enough to ask. I checked the time. 6:42 p.m. That's when I saw the security guard. He was leaning against a column near a closed-down jewellery kiosk, arms crossed, his eyes dull and uninterested. I asked if he had seen my wife, a woman in her 40s, short brown hair, red coat. He didn't even look up when he muttered, "No one's passed through here in over an hour." His voice was flat, almost robotic. That was impossible. I had watched dozens of people walk by earlier. When I pointed that out, he just shrugged and walked away like I was bothering him. I headed for the mall directory, hoping to retrace her steps. The touchscreen map flickered, glitched, then froze on a single red dot pulsing near level 4, storage and maintenance. That floor wasn't even listed on the usual elevator menu. Curious and increasingly uneasy, I searched for a stairwell, thinking maybe the signage was wrong, but all signs stopped at level 3, and yet that red dot stayed, glowing like a heartbeat. I eventually found an old freight elevator hidden behind the utility corridor near the service restrooms. It looked abandoned, rusted buttons, the walls scratched with keys and initials, but it worked. I pressed the faded 4, expecting it not to respond, but the doors closed with a heavy clunk, and the elevator groaned upward. Level 4 was nothing like the rest of the mall. The air was colder, the walls bare concrete, and overhead lights buzzed in a maddening rhythm. Long rows of mannequins stood in the dark, some dressed, some broken, some just heads or limbs placed randomly on the floor. It smelled of wet cardboard and forgotten time. And then I heard it, heels clicking faintly in the distance. My wife. I called out, my voice echoing into the emptiness. No answer. I moved forward slowly, past what looked like discarded store signs and dusty shelving units. Then I heard whispering. At first I thought it was my imagination, but no, it was low and close. I turned a corner and found myself in a strange corridor, lined with mannequins on both sides. Their heads were all turned, facing me. I froze. One mannequin's face was painted crudely with a smile, only it wasn't paint. It looked smeared with something organic. I stepped back instinctively, and one of them shifted slightly, ever so subtly, like it had just moved. I blinked hard. It was impossible. They were just plastic, weren't they? At the end of the corridor was a large mirror, cracked down the middle. I looked into it and froze. The reflection wasn't right. The mannequins behind me were facing away in the glass, their heads turned from mine, and my reflection, my face, it was watching me. It blinked before I did. I stumbled back, bumping into one of the mannequins, which tipped forward and crashed to the floor. but the sound was wrong. It didn't clatter like hollow plastic. It thudded. Inside it, there was something. A pale human arm slipped from the broken torso. I screamed, running, heart hammering. I found a heavy door marked surveillance. I threw it open. Inside was a room full of dusty monitors and a wall of labelled VHS tapes. The screens flickered. Some showed current camera feeds, empty corridors, flickering lights, mannequins standing still. But one showed my wife. She was standing in a hallway I didn't recognize, looking terrified, banging on a metal door. I shouted, trying to find the right hallway. Then the screen went dark. The monitor made a soft click, and the image was gone. I looked at the wall of tapes, many labelled with dates. Some were decades old. One caught my eye. DEC 08, lost, number 37. I felt sick, lost. I grabbed the tape and tried to find a VCR. The whole room felt like it was closing in on me. When I finally got it running, the footage was grainy. A man, maybe in his 50s, was walking through the same corridors I had just come from. He was yelling a name I couldn't make out. Then it cut to static, and then to him sitting against a wall, staring, unmoving, for hours. Then, nothing. I stepped back. On the desk was a dusty clipboard with dozens of names, dates, and a final column labelled recovered. Most boxes were blank. My wife's name wasn't there, yet. But how long before it would be? I raced back toward the elevator, but the corridors seemed unfamiliar now. The mannequins had moved again. They were closer. Some were missing heads. Others had cracks running through them, as if they'd been struggling to escape their own form. One had my wife's coat on it. I lost it. I screamed at them, knocked one over, and it shattered like ceramic. Inside, teeth. At last, I found the elevator again and slammed the button. As the doors slid open, I thought I saw my wife's face reflected in the glass. But it wasn't her. It was something wearing her face, grinning. I backed away. The doors closed, and behind me, the whispering returned. They never found her. When security reviewed the footage from that day, there was no sign of her entering the building. None of me going to level 4. The guards swore there was no level 4, and when I returned days later to prove it, the elevator was gone. Just a blank wall where it had been. But I remember the smell, the mannequins, her voice, screaming faintly from somewhere behind a mirror. And every year since then, on the same date, I receive a photo in the mail, always of a mannequin, always in a red coat, and always looking a little more like her. I always avoided late-night shifts, but that Friday, my co-worker Darren had called in sick, and the manager needed someone to close. The mall had extended hours for a seasonal promotion, so I agreed to cover. It was a decision I regret to this day, not just because of what I saw, but because of what I felt, the kind of dread that stays in your bones long after the lights come back on. At 9:45 p.m, the mall was almost deserted. The glowing signs flickered more than usual, and that glossy floor, usually polished to perfection, seemed dull, smeared in places. I was on the second floor, near the escalators, heading to the security office to check the final round of camera feeds. That's when I first noticed it. A child's laughter, faint and echoing, coming from the central atrium. But when I looked down, there was no one. Thinking it might be someone's kid lingering past hours, I walked toward the atrium railing. The glass ceiling above reflected parts of the lower floor, clothing stores shuttered, digital ads looping endlessly. I stood in silence, no laughter, just a slow, deliberate creak, as if someone was walking across a tile that wasn't there. Then I saw it, in the reflection of the glass ceiling, not on the floor itself. A figure moved slowly between stores, thin, barefoot, and dragging something behind. But when I looked down, physically down, the space was empty. Nothing. I stared back up at the reflection, and it had stopped walking. It was staring straight up at me. My breath hitched. I didn't even realize I'd started backing away until my shoulder bumped a kiosk. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it was some weird lighting effect or fatigue. But inside, something sank, an instinct I couldn't shake. I turned and hurried to the security room. The security room smelled like burnt plastic and stale coffee. I settled into the chair and cycled through the camera feeds. Nothing odd at first. Then I noticed something strange on camera 7, the one facing the western corridor. A lone mannequin standing in the middle of the hallway. No displays nearby, just it, tilted slightly to the side, arms too long, like someone had stretched it. I tried switching angles, but every time I changed the feed, the same mannequin appeared, no matter the camera. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes. This had to be a glitch. But when I leaned forward and tapped the rewind button, I froze. The mannequin was not there a minute ago. It had simply appeared. And now, it was closer to the camera. I stood up, pushing the chair back, heart thudding. "Okay," I muttered, "that's enough." I grabbed the radio and tried to call maintenance. Static, not even a crackle. I picked up the desk phone, dead tone. I reached for my phone, but it wouldn't unlock. Just stayed on a black screen with a faint, pulsing glow in the center. That glow, it looked like an eye. I rushed to the door to leave the room, but it wouldn't budge. Not locked. It felt sealed, like the air itself had turned to glass. That's when I heard footsteps outside. Not hurried, not panicked, slow, wet. And I swear to God, they stopped right at the door. Then came the knock. 3 slow, steady knocks. As if whoever, whatever was out there, wanted to make sure I heard. At 10:30 p.m, the lights flickered off. Complete darkness for a full 5 seconds. When they returned, the mannequin was gone from all screens, but the feed for the food court, camera 12, was back online, showing a chair slowly spinning by itself near the fountain. I made up my mind. I had to get out. The emergency stairwell was my only hope. I managed to wedge the security door open using the base of the fire extinguisher. The air in the corridor felt heavier than before, like I was walking through humidity that didn't exist. I descended toward the lower level, heart pounding with each creak of my shoes. As I passed the toy store, something caught my eye. Every toy in the window, motionless seconds ago, was now facing outward, eyes painted wide, smiles curled too far. My stomach turned. I kept walking. I reached the lower level, the parking garage entrance within sight. But something was wrong. The escalator I'd used dozens of times was no longer moving, not just frozen, but twisted. The steps were bent in unnatural angles, as if someone had grabbed it and snapped it like a spine. I turned and saw a corridor that wasn't there before. It ran alongside the shuttered cinema, dimly lit by a reddish glow. Against every logical part of my brain, I walked toward it. Maybe it led to an exit. Maybe this was all some elaborate prank, some viral campaign. The corridor grew colder with each step. The walls were unfinished, concrete with deep, claw-like grooves. The sound of my steps was drowned out by a new noise. Whispers, thousands of them, repeating one word over and over. Look. At the end of the corridor, I emerged beneath the glass atrium. I had somehow gone in a circle, but this wasn't the same mall. The stores were in ruins, as if bombed out decades ago. The fountain was dry, cracked, and in the center, on the floor where I once saw the reflection, was the figure. It stood still, taller than I expected, pale as bone, with fingers that bent backward at the joints. Its face, if you could call it that, had no mouth, just a stretched canvas of skin, pulled tight over where features should have been. But it looked at me. I felt its gaze, like pins, sliding beneath my fingernails. I couldn't scream, couldn't run. Then I heard the laughter again, the child, but it was inside my head this time. I must have blacked out. When I woke, I was outside the mall, sitting on the sidewalk in front of the darkened entrance. My phone was on the ground beside me, working fine. The time was 6:04 a.m. No missed calls, no messages. The mall had no record of me working that night. Darren had apparently worked the shift, and he said nothing strange happened. Security logs, blank. The cameras, all offline for routine maintenance, they claimed. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And now, every time I pass that mall, I see the reflection in the glass atrium. It's still there, still watching, still waiting. Catherine never liked big shopping malls. Too many people, too much light, and that oddly sterile smell that clung to everything. But Thursday afternoons were quiet, especially around 3 p.m. That's why she was there, just in and out. A pair of shoes, a cup of coffee, and then back home. The Westfield Arcadia Mall had always seemed a little off to her, though she could never put her finger on why. Maybe it was how the corridors seemed to echo even when no one was around, or how the fluorescent lights flickered in sync like some silent mechanical pulse. She parked close to the east entrance and stepped inside, barely noticing the odd shimmer in the glass as the sliding doors parted. Once inside, she paused. Something was wrong. The air felt heavier than usual, like walking into a room where someone had been arguing just seconds before. The food court was nearly empty, just a few people scattered about, mostly elderly or teenagers killing time. As she walked past the central fountain, her heels tapped sharply on the tiled floor. She glanced toward the information desk. There was no attendant. Odd, she thought, but kept moving. She didn't realize then that she wouldn't see another mall employee for the rest of the day. At the shoe store, Catherine found what she needed quickly. A muted beige pair of walking shoes. Comfortable, unassuming, just her style. The young man at the register didn't speak a word. He scanned the box, took her card, and handed her the bag without eye contact. "Thank you," she said, though he didn't respond. She stepped out into the hallway and felt a sudden draft. She turned around. The store was gone. Or rather, the gate was down, closed. It had been opened seconds ago. That's when she saw him. Across the food court, Near the carousel, an old one no longer in use, stood a man in a grey hoodie. He wasn't doing anything, just standing, facing her. She looked away quickly and started walking toward the coffee shop, suddenly needing caffeine more than she thought. When she looked back, he was gone. Catherine shook her head. "Stop it," she muttered, but the air had changed again, and her skin was starting to prickle. The coffee shop was unusually quiet. No music, no chatter, just the faint hum of machines. A barista stood behind the counter, facing away from her, unmoving. "Hi, could I get a cappuccino?" Catherine asked, her voice cracking slightly. The barista didn't move. She repeated herself, louder. Still nothing. Slowly, she approached the counter. There were no cups, no cash register, no scent of coffee, just a perfectly clean countertop and a person who didn't seem to breathe. Catherine backed away. Her phone buzzed. Finally, she thought. She reached into her bag, but her phone wasn't buzzing. It was completely black, dead. She hadn't even noticed the time. 3:41 p.m. Hadn't she come in around 3? She glanced around, noticing how dim the mall had become. The lights were still on, but they seemed distant, like sunlight through fog. And somewhere far behind her, she heard that distinct sound, the slow creak of the carousel starting to turn. She turned, eyes wide. The carousel, unplugged, unused for years, was rotating, slowly, lazily. No music, no lights. Just the groaning of metal on metal, and on one of the painted horses sat the man in the grey hoodie. Catherine took a step back. "What the hell is this?" she whispered. Her voice bounced off the walls and came back. Only it wasn't her voice anymore. It was deeper, male, repeating her exact words in a slow, dragging echo. She ran, not even sure where to. She passed the shuttered shoe store, now entirely bricked off like it had never existed, past the food court, past the information desk, still unmanned. Every direction looked the same. White tile, glass storefronts, flickering lights. It was a loop, the same corridor, repeating. She stopped and pressed her hands to her ears. There it was again, her voice, echoing, distorting, bending into something unfamiliar, and underneath it, something darker, breathing. Catherine stumbled into a small indoor playground meant for toddlers. Bright plastic tunnels, rubber flooring. It was dark, but she welcomed the change. Anything to escape the endless corridors. She crouched behind a plastic slide and tried to calm her breath. Her hands trembled. She touched her phone again. Still nothing. No signal. No light. She pressed the power button over and over, hoping something would flicker on. Instead, it buzzed. A message appeared. "Do not leave yet." Her breath caught. She looked around, heart pounding. The tunnel above her shifted. Something had moved, crawling, slow and deliberate. A child's giggle echoed high-pitched and wrong. Catherine stared up into the dark mouth of the tunnel, and for a split second, she swore she saw fingers, not childlike, long, wet. She bolted from the playground, the echo of footsteps, not hers, close behind. The emergency exit sign was glowing ahead like a beacon. She raced toward it, heart slamming in her chest. Her hand touched the bar, and the door wouldn't budge. She slammed her shoulder into it. Nothing. The glowing exit flickered, and then the letters rearranged themselves slowly, as if painted by invisible hands. Now it read, "Stay." Catherine screamed. She turned around, and every shop around her had gone dark. Inside the glass windows were mannequins, but they weren't still. their heads tilted toward her, one by one. Then their hands twitched, and without a sound, they began to tap against the glass in perfect unison. Tap, tap, tap. Somewhere in the distance, mole music started to play, a warped version of an old pop song, the kind you'd hear on speakers while trying on clothes. Catherine followed the sound. It led her downward, down an escalator that was moving on its own. The lower floor wasn't part of the mall. It was unfinished. Concrete walls, exposed wires, dust-filled air. She stepped off and turned to go back up. The escalator had vanished. In the center of the basement was a single door, heavy, industrial. She approached it like it might explode. There was a keypad. The screen lit up. "Catherine," it said. Her breath caught, and then the screen flashed again. "Welcome back." Her knees buckled. She didn't know why, but something deep inside her remembered this place. She opened the door. Inside, it was pitch black. She stepped in, and it shut behind her. A dim light blinked on above. The room was empty, except for one thing: a mirror, old, framed in rusted iron. She approached it slowly. Her reflection didn't move with her. It stood still, and then it smiled. Catherine stepped back. Her reflection did not. Instead, it raised a hand and pointed. Behind her, she turned slowly and saw shelves, hundreds of them, each holding items people had once lost in the mall: scarves, phones, a single baby shoe, and at the very end, her old bracelet, one she had lost when she was 12. At this very mall, she hadn't been back since, until today. Everything rushed back like a flood: the carousel, the shoe store, the missing girl from years ago. That had been her. She had vanished here, but they said she was found. She remembered none of it. Until now, the man in the hoodie wasn't a stranger. He was the janitor from that day, and he'd warned her. "Don't go near the basement," he had said. But she had. The mirror cracked. Her reflection stepped forward. Out. It smiled with her face. Only slightly. Off. And then everything went dark. Catherine's body was later found in the playground tunnel. Face frozen in shock. Phone clenched in her hand, screen flashing one message: "Welcome back."